Hello, so this is an interview with Carla Laws from Alderman Richard Hallam Primary in Leicester City. Pleased and proud to be working with Carla, and Carla is the assistant head, designated safeguarding lead, is that right?
Yes.
Mental health lead, and she's responsible for personal development, behaviour and attitude. So a woman of many hats and a lot of responsibility. All to do with mental health and well-being, aren't they, really? All of those kind of underpinned by that. So I'm going to be going through a series of questions with Carla, and Worth It worked with Carla and her school a couple of years ago now, 2 or 3 years
back
ago.
I think it was, 2016, 17, something like that.
Yeah, and you've been on quite a journey of whole school mental health since then. So we're going to be chatting about that and the impact that it's had on your school and your children and staff. So give us a brief overview then, Carla, about your school and the community that it's in.
So we're the largest primary school in Leicester. We've got about 860 children on roll at the moment. So 4 form-entry all the way from nursery to year 6. So we're very big. Yeah, absolutely massive.
What's the kind of community like that the school?
It was a real mishmash. That it's one of those things, whenever we try and sum up our community, it's almost impossible. So compared to national, we've got more EAL, but compared to local, we've got fewer, but then we have 43 different languages. So even though we haven't got that many EAL children, they come from all over the place. So no one speaks the same language as each other, and everything to do with our school is a mishmash. So we have some children who are free school meals and from working class backgrounds, but then we also have professional families. So our school is a real melting pot of different communities. Yeah,
it's a big undertaking that you have in your role to support the mental health.
There's a lot of different needs in our area, and even in terms of things like local deprivation, we're between 2 areas, one of which is quite affluent and one of which is not. So all of the children we get in are vastly different.
Yeah, and I think if your school can do this, with those challenges, then it kind of helps other schools get maybe have different contexts, feel more able. So your school and you personally have been doing a lot of work on children's mental health and well-being and resilience over the past few years. How do you see this work fitting into the wider responsibilities of your school?
So I think it's a real priority of the school. I think since we did the training with yourself, it's very much been at the forefront of SLT's agenda, and that's sort of filtered out. So it's very much a priority of all of us. And I think it's seeing the impact that it has makes you want to keep it as a priority. So when we first started doing it, almost mental health stood on its own a little bit, but the more work we've done on it, the more we've embedded it into our curriculum, into our lessons, and you start to see the children really change and their attitudes towards school change and improve, and behavior, and you just see this ripple effect of how it touches every single part of school life, which has been really amazing to see. It's completely intrinsic to the ethos of our school. I think what we wanted was that feeling that when you walk, the moment you enter the school, which you're not allowed to at the moment, but
the work that you've been doing at your school is amazing, and it sounds like so well, it's a real good example of positive education, really. So what was it that started that journey off for you? Where did you start on the journey?
So when we started, and I first sort of became assistant head and looked at personal development, it was more focused at children who had a specific need. It certainly wasn't a whole school ethos, and I would definitely say that it was the Worth It training that kicked it all off for me, in terms of getting it embedded across the whole curriculum, making it something for all staff and all children, and that was where the kind of whole school culture, and with the 8 principles that Worth It uses, that really underpinned it for me, and how we wanted to introduce it into our school.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm really pleased that we could help you on that journey and sort of launch it off, because what we always try and say is that, you know, we give you the kind of rules or the foundations, and then you go and do it yourself, and it emerges, and then it becomes self-sustaining. Have you found that?
Yeah, on the training you did, you talked about it being explicit and then implicit and then embedded. And I've definitely seen that journey in our school of when we first started it, it was very much the explicit teaching, and we kind of looked into skills-based teaching, but with the Worth It training, we turned that into the character strengths. And we started by having, we call them our ingredients for success. And those are each of the character strengths. So we started by introducing that with staff and children, and then we use those in every single lesson we do. So whether it's maths or in English, you have your learning objective, but you also have the character strengths that you're going to use for that lesson. And that's when it kind of became implicit. And now it's just absolutely embedded across the whole school, in terms of we use it in our parents' evening and our reports. That language has become a shared language of the school. And it's just, yeah, it's really shaped the way the school looks.
Oh. I just feel really emotional. I just feel really emotional. Like, and it's just like 860 kids, 860 families, you know, like that are impacted by positive education on a daily basis. And anyone that comes to my workshops, and you heard me say this too, like, my dream is that schools, the atmosphere, just going to that school and being in that atmosphere,
is that
improves well-being. Yeah, just by walking in the door. And like, you've done that, haven't you? You've got to that stage.
Yeah, and it's something, you said it, and it made us really conscious of it, it's that feel that you can't kind of prescribe how you make it, but it's all the little bits that you do. So it's things like we decorated our staff room so that it didn't have any notices up. It was just like a cool living room where people could go and relax. And so when visitors come into school, they go in there and they often comment like, oh, this is such a lovely staff room, it's really welcoming, and bookshelves and nice things all around.
Yeah, and a place that says you matter. That's sort of
we did it. The senior leadership team and a few other helpers did it secretly after school on a Friday. So the staff came in on the Monday. It was a nice surprise for them, and it was all about making staff feel valued and letting them know that we want them to have that space where they feel safe and able to have a bit of
yeah, and that's a really good staff wellbeing intervention that you wouldn't necessarily think is an obvious intervention, like that changing that physical space for them and it's a sustainable intervention. You do it once and you know it's kind of done. Okay, so did you have any triggers or problems that sort of kicked off your approach to developing school mental health and wellbeing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that well, when I very first started at the school, workload was an issue, in terms of there felt like a lot of tasks that weren't necessary, and it was always a bugbear of people that, you know, what am I doing this for? If you can see the impact it has on the kids, then you're more than happy to go the extra mile. But when you feel like you're doing admin for admin's sake and things like that, so staff workload was a bit of a trigger. Children's resilience to tricky situations, sometimes that would be in terms of their behavior and how they interacted with each other. Sometimes it would be in lessons, if there was a maths problem, that sort of just giving up and not having a go, and that can-do attitude. So I think they were probably the main triggers, I think. And then also when I did the Worth It training, I'd recently become assistant head. We had a bit of an SLT reshuffle, so we had 2 new assistant heads. Our current head teacher was in the process of leaving, so we had a dual headship. So I think it just, as SLT changed, it became more of a priority for the senior leadership team as well.
And did you know that like wellbeing, like a whole school approach to wellbeing, would be the solution, or
no?
Did it just happen at the same time?
Yeah, it was. It kind of happened at the same time, and mental health is something I'm really passionate about, and I have been for a while. We definitely didn't realize the impact it would have on the whole school. We thought it would make children happier. We hoped it would make staff happier. We weren't sure if that would work, but it's had a huge impact, and it's the positive psychology of Worth It, I think, has sort of infiltrated every bit of the school. So it's that real positive attitude to taking things on, and our children are so much more resilient than they were, and our staff, the workload, we've really reduced workload significantly, because we wanted staff to have that work-life balance, and they didn't for a while, and now they definitely do. So that's really good.
So many things I want to ask you, like,
oh, go for it.
So many things. Did you have any fears or reservations about working on whole school wellbeing as that became apparent that was a possible way forward?
Yeah, I think in terms of school priorities, I think there's always that temptation, particularly with the looming shadow of Ofsted, that it needs to be, your focus must be on attainment, and it must be on the progress of the children, and data, very data driven. And I think sometimes that can be a bit of a worry with mental health, because it can be hard to make that data driven and prove what you're doing. Like we said, that ethos of the school and feeling when you come in is very hard to turn into quantitative data, but I think it's still an ethos, and I think it's really important. But I think that was maybe a bit of a challenge. And then it's always a bit of a challenge. You don't know if you're going to get the buy-in from staff and from families and from children, so trying to structure it in a way that people can see it as something working for them and not an extra thing to do. I think that's always, with anything new that you start talking about, people, you're going to always get some people who at first think, oh great, it's another initiative, it's another thing that we have to be in charge of now. So sort of reframing it and getting people to see how it will impact positively on them was an interesting challenge.
Yeah, and the thing with you is you came on an external course for mental health leads, if you like, didn't you?
Yeah.
And then you went and you did it all by yourself. We didn't come into, apart from that one one-to-one session that we had for about an hour, you took the tools from the toolkit and then did it all yourself. So it was quite cost effective, I suppose.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. Our school has had a very limited budget for a number of years, so that's always been one of our factors that's made things tricky, is how do you do it without spending any money, or very little money.
and you managed it.
Well, we have, and it's taken some creative thinking.
Yeah.
And
I think it's that creativity that has made it like sustainable and embedded as well.
Yeah.
So for you it was quite an investment of time. Did you feel like that was hard to justify or anything, with the other pressures of achievement and things?
I don't really think so. I think because we had, I mean, with the 8 principles, it's leadership and management at the core of it. And I think because the rest of the senior leadership team believe passionately in mental health and wellbeing, I think there was that recognition that it deserved time. But then I also think, although I am the lead for mental health in terms of how it's run across the school, I very much don't do it on my own. It is such a team effort. So the deputy head supports with all the staff wellbeing. We've got a mental health champion, Jade, who is absolutely fantastic, and she helps with staff and children. We've got our Senko, who supports with children who need targeted support. Last year we created a workload reduction and wellbeing team, which has got there's about 30 members from across the school, and that's teachers, support staff, admin staff. So it's a bit of everyone, all chipping in with ideas and running initiatives. And I think as people have seen the impact the things we've done has had, and the way it's shaped the school, people want to give their time towards it as well. So I don't think it's ever been too much of an issue in terms of time.
Yeah, and there's loads of interesting stuff you're saying there about the buy-in from your colleagues, and it's almost like you had to get it going, and then it kind of
so it started sort of slowly and just little changes, and as people get used to those and start to see the impact of those, they like it and they move forwards with it. It was interesting because I did an inset day training all about mental health and well-being and how we can support it, and afterwards, a group of our support staff came up and were like, this is amazing, this is exactly what we want to be doing, and we can really see how that would impact on behaviour, and it got that buy-in, and they've just been champions of it in the school.
Yeah. I love it, so exciting. So how long have you been working on this now then?
So I think it's been about 4 years. I think it was 2016 that I did the Worth It course, or it was that academic year. So yeah, it's been about 4 years, and it's one of those things when you kind of don't always notice how far you've come, and you'd have to sort of take a step back and go, do you know what, we've done a lot, and things have really changed in that time. So in terms of the workload that we've got, in terms of the children's behaviour and how they feel, I think we've come a long way. But yeah, it's 4 years and we've just made steady progress, and each year we try new things and adapt it, and some things work and some things don't, and
iterative cycles of change.
Yeah, we do a lot of feedback. So we do pupil conferencing and staff surveys and parent surveys, so we constantly have that cycle of what can we be doing, what's our next priority.
Yeah. And you're kind of using the same principles, aren't you? Like strengths and your ingredients for success are like threaded through every layer, but you kind of threaded them like almost like spiraled it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so
like that.
yeah. So it started sort of just teaching them explicitly and independently, and then we've started to weave it into everything that the children were doing, and now it's in everything. If you look at any of our reports, you'll see that language in there, and it's completely woven into the fabric of the school.
Like it. You remember my metaphors, Carla?
Oh, I love a metaphor.
Oh yeah, well, it's a good way to explain the intangible, isn't it? That's the thing. It is intangible, and I find as an organisation, it's hard for us to articulate that across to people that are trying to understand this stuff. Like, it is the atmosphere, it is intangible change.
Yeah, it was that just reminded me, we had a member of staff who interviewed a couple of years ago, and we always ask the question, why do you want to work at this school? And she said, I'd been round on a course, and she went, and it was that feel. She went, the feel of the school. She'd been at her previous school for 15 years and loved it, and she went, that was the first time I ever thought, oh, this is a school I could work at. And it was because of the feel of it as she walked around. And I was like, well, that is awesome.
Yeah. Does it help you with recruitment and retention and things as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We used to, because we've got quite a large staff, because we're quite a large school, sort of in the first days when I was there, most years you'd have maybe 5-6 teachers leave, and in the past 3 years we've only had 2 staff leave, one of them because she was relocating, and one of them didn't want to teach anymore. She was retiring. So you know, it's people aren't burning out, and people aren't leaving because they're not happy with the school. So I think it's amazing. Been a real,
especially at the moment, especially, you know, with teacher recruitment issues that are happening out there in many schools. And like, you wouldn't, you know, when you started off on this journey, did you think that the ripple effect, as you say, would have been that far reaching?
No. No, absolutely didn't. I thought it would. I saw the impact on the children more than I think I realised how much it would impact on staff.
Yeah. Staff and children are 2 sides of the same coin.
They are very much so. And it definitely, you can see that the happier staff are, the more that impacts on the kids. So it's definitely getting that sort of balance between the two.
So can you explain, you've touched on this a little bit, but the steps you actually took over you've like some key milestones that you've achieved over the past 4 years?
Yeah, so definitely started with the character strengths. I found that absolutely fascinating. I think the first thing that I did when I did the training was go onto the VIA website and do the test and see what my strengths were. And then
I bet one of them is perspective. Am I right? Is one of your strengths perspective?
Humor was my top one, which I think perspective was middly, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. yeah, so I really enjoyed that. So then I got all the staff to do that. I was like, it's just, you don't have to, but it's really fun. And then we rolled that out to the children. And like I said, we started off doing it explicitly, where we would do activities related to the ingredients for success. So if it was teamwork, we would do team building activity. And then what we did was we started to use those in every lesson. So no matter what it is, we would have the ingredients for success alongside the learning objective. And I think that had a really big impact, because I think what teachers saw was how much it helped to boost the children's self-esteem, because we have something called the expert initiative for our gifted and talented pupils, so they can be an expert in a lesson. So if it's column addition, they can be a column addition expert, and they can support other children and build those leadership skills. But then what we started to do was you would have an expert in teamwork or an expert in listening. So some of those children who are low retainers suddenly were the expert, and they are brilliant at doing teamwork. They're amazing at listening to others and sharing their ideas. And you could see the impact that had on them, that oh, I'm an expert, I'm really good at this. Yeah, so it kind of built that into the lessons. And then, like I said, the next step was getting that parent carer buy-in. So we started having praise postcards. So each teacher sends 2 home a week, and they're focused on a spotlight. So this week's spotlight is resilience. So everyone chooses 2 children in their class, and the children nominate each other throughout the week of, I've seen them show really good resilience. And then the teacher chooses 2 children who get a postcard. And so then the parents know that, oh, they've shown really good resilience. So that's amazing. So it's kind of been bit by bit with the character strengths. That was definitely the first thing. Then it was the mental health training. So one of the things that you shared with us was that not looking at mental health just on a single axis, but looking at the flourishing and the languishing, and how we all move around it, and sharing that with staff. And I think people could see a bit of themselves in that, and they could see times when they've felt like they've been languishing, and what they've done and their coping strategies. And so doing that with the children and rolling it out. Staff, lots of wellbeing initiatives. We kind of have an attitude of sort of throw it all at the wall and see what sticks. So we've tried some things that just didn't work for whatever reason. So one of the first things I did was a shout out board, and that was a catastrophic failure in us, because some people there was a group who were nominating each other all the time, but then other people were getting upset because they weren't getting as many nominations, and it just became a whole thing. Like then no. we tweaked that, and now we have the appreciation station where we do thank you cards, and there's a big bank of thank you cards in the staff room, and you can just grab one and write them. So it's not so on show for everyone as to who's got them, and it's just a personal thing. And when you get one, it's a really lovely feeling. And we've done something similar with the Whisper initiative. I heard a whisper that you've done really well, and then you get Whisper.
Nice.
That's lovely. I got a whisper this morning, and it really made my week.
But these are such tiny things, aren't they? But they do all add up to a massive, big change, don't they?
Yeah, and it's been lots and lots of little things that have built that sustainable change. And some things you stick with, and some things you try and chuck out, and it's a constant process.
What would you say are the most significant things that have made a difference to your school?
I think relationships, prioritizing relationships has been a really strong one, both between staff and children, and between the children. So we did a lot of team building activities. Where we're such a big school, you ended up in almost pockets, where it was like the foundation pocket and the key stage 1 pocket. And so building the relationships between staff was really important. So we did a lot of team building activities, which were chaotic and fun. A lot of running around the school and having to complete challenges, and that was really good. And we made that optional for all staff. A lot of the team building and stress buster things we do, that we make them all optional. So we put on different events, but you don't have to do it, because sometimes people just want the time. And sometimes,
yeah, you can't make well-being mandatory, can you?
Yeah, exactly. So so that one's been key, building those relationships. And that was something I think has been really important this year, with lockdown. Trying to keep those relationships and that sense of belonging has been huge. So we've had all different lockdown activities for staff, where we've done quizzes every week, or bingo, or even just virtual staff room and chats. We've done it for the kids, where we did marvelous missions and filmed little activities that they could have a go at while they were off, and they could tweet us with things, so that you don't lose that sense of belonging that I think is really important. Training, lots of training, I think, so that you all have a cohesive vision and you're all working towards the same thing. So we've done training with our staff, we've done parents and carers sort of engagement activities, where we've invited them in to show them what the character strengths are. We've done governor training, so that it really trying to bring everyone in together to work towards the same thing. 5 ways to wellbeing, we use that a lot.
Yeah.
That's been really key. We use that in the marvelous missions. We were using those. We've just done a lockdown calendar of activities that the kids can do while we're in our second lockdown, and that's all about the 5 ways to wellbeing. And I think that's been quite a significant thing, introducing that and getting that up and running and in the air, so everyone knows what it is, so staff know what the 5 ways to wellbeing are, and the kids do, and they all are able to work towards it. I think it's been really good.
Shared language and understanding.
Yeah,
wellbeing, basically.
Definitely. And I think just being more open. So I think we've kind of pushed emotional literacy, and we have emotional check-ins every day. So when you do the register, you just do an out of 5, how are we feeling, and it's just encourages the children to talk about mental health, because I think that talk is, I say every time I have to do an assembly for the kids, I say talk is the most important thing we can do. And the teachers have noticed that when they do it as well, it helps the kids to open up. So when the teachers say, do you know what, today I'm a 2, I'm tired, this is going on, I've got this going on, without going into too many details, but just being open with them, the kids then see that and respect that, and then it helps to build their empathy as well. So one of my
modeling that vulnerability, aren't they?
One of the teachers is moving house today. So this week, earlier in the week, she said to her class, she was like, I'm a 2, I'm having to pack, the contracts haven't go through. She was like, it's very stressful. And she said all day her kids just kept checking with her, going, are you all right, miss? Is there anything we can do? We want to and it just builds that empathy. She was like, really lovely.
But then how's that helping her well-being and her stress levels,
Massively.
Teaching is a stressful profession, and then if the children are almost a resource to buffer against adversity, it's amazing.
Feels like you're kind of working together. We're all in this together. Let's look after each other.
And how's it helped, with all those interventions that you put in place during lockdown? And I know you're in Leicester City too, so you've never been out of lockdown.
No.
How's it helped you with the learning and getting the kids back into school and back on track?
Well, we did quite a lot of training in inset week and before the summer holidays of, the children are really going to struggle coming back to school. They're going to, be out of routines. They're going to really struggle to interact with each other. And we were really braced for the worst. And then that first week came and we were like, they've settled straight back in. They were so happy to be back at school. They were so excited to be with their teachers and be with each other. It was really lovely. And we were like, this is great. Attendance was really high.
Amazing. So you think it's part of this culture of wellbeing that's helped with that?
Yeah, definitely. And because we did the recovery curriculum, so we focused on wellbeing in those first few weeks, and we focused on ifs and making sure our ingredients for success were used very much so. I definitely think it had a big impact, that whole school ethos.
Okay, so what has changed as a result? If you look at your school 4 years ago when you started on your journey in your new role and where you are now, has there been marked changes that have been made?
So I think in terms of the children, I think they are much better with self-regulation. They are able to sort of understand their feelings a bit more. They're able to articulate how they're feeling and therefore cope with it. So it's that very much, we say it's the name and reframe. They know what they're feeling and they're able to reframe that and handle it in a positive way. And a big focus part of that as well has been using restorative justice in our behaviour. So everything is about the talk and the moving on and how we move things on more positively and how we fix our way of looking at things to be more positive. That sort of learned optimism almost thing of, we're going to think about this positively. What's our next step? What do we need to do? So I think that's been a big one. I think the self-esteem, like I said, with the ingredients for success and the expert initiative, self-esteem's really grown in the school and the children are so much more confident. And then what we found is at the beginning, like I said, resilience wasn't great. That resilience has really grown. Children are so much more willing to have a go and get things wrong because they know that they're learning through it and they're learning through their mistakes, and it's all good. The shared language, I think, has been really important, and having that with staff and parents and carers and using it to reframe some of the negatives. So one of the things I took away from the Worth It training was that looking at overplayed strengths. So when parents and carers are talking about their child being bossy, well, oh yeah, they are showing really good leadership skills, you're right. So now we need to look at how they communicate. So I think that's been really good, and sort of just framing everything more positively has been really big. Workload reduction has been huge, and one of the things we do for staff is we do working parties for pretty much everything. So when we're looking at reports, we have a working party with anyone who wants to come, and we talk about what do the reports have to have, like statutory things, what is manageable, what do we think is going to be effective, and then we build it together so that it's manageable for staff, but it still does everything it needs to do, and it's not overwhelming or burdensome, and it doesn't affect your work-life balance too much. So we do that. We've got another one in a few weeks for feedback, because we're always looking at how we do marking and feedback, because that is, as any teacher will tell you, that's often one of the big drain time. And then when we looked at it, it wasn't helping the children, having reams of marking. So why are we doing it? So now we use Seesaw, and we do a lot of verbal feedback, and that's so much more purposeful for the children, but it's also much easier for the staff. So I think workload reduction has been absolutely huge, and it also gives staff more autonomy. If you have a working party, they have that ownership over it, and they're much happier with it. They're happier to do things.
So you're modelling a participatory approach, Carla. That's the
job
crafting. Job crafting. That's so occupational psychology approach that you're using is basically job crafting, where the staff are co-creating and co-producing their jobs together. It's amazing.
And then having the workload
reduction. I could write a journal article about it.
Having the workload reduction team as well. Like, they just come to us and say, I was thinking about this and I don't know if that works, or maybe we could try this. And so it's constantly trying new things and trying to shape it a bit.
But you're modelling a growth mindset as well all the time, aren't you? By this having a go attitude, and kind of having a go and learning if it works, learning if it doesn't work, and trying again.
And I think it's important that the children
that as a stuff team to the children as well.
Have a go. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it's an absolute failure. You won't learn if you don't try.
Has there been any impacts on like the hard figures, like attendance or
attendance has been steadily growing over the past few years. So we've been from when I started Worth It, I think we were at sort of 95% attendance. We're now at 97.2 or something. So we're working towards that outstanding attendance. That's been good. Behaviour, because that's part of my role. I do the behaviour analysis, and behaviour's really drastically improved in the school. It's outstanding now. The children are very polite, they're well mannered, they're able to work things out with each other, and we've done sort of work on peer mediation, because we're at that point now where the children are able to self-regulate, and that's been amazing. So behaviour incidences have dramatically gone down, but also the types of behavior we have tend to just be low level disruption. So things like shouting out because they want to say the answer rather than anything more serious. So that's been really good. And then, like I said, staff retention as well. The hard data around that is really positive, that we have a lot of staff join as NQTs and then they just stay with us and that's it. So our staff
don't want to leave.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really good.
And what have you had an Ofsted visit in the last few years?
Oh yes, we had one 2 years ago, I think. Yep, and that was really positive, and they commented, they had their meeting with staff and talking about how staff were doing, and that was really positive, and there was a lot of good feedback from that. They commented on the character strengths, the ingredients for success, and how well embedded that was, and that children were very confident in that, and positive well-being as a whole. So that was really good. Yeah, our next step is,
and the fact they're even noticing, that's a change, isn't it?
Yeah, so our next step is we're applying for the mental health award and hoping to get that.
I'm sure you'll get a gold. You should be aiming for a gold. Was there any barriers that you had to overcome in order to achieve this success?
Yeah. The biggest barrier was budget. Just trying to do things on a real shoestring, like we really had no money at all. So we would go to meetings and people would have these wonderful ideas, but they cost money and we just couldn't go with it. So we would have to think of either cheap workarounds or free things that we could do instead. So with the staff room, trying to do a staff room on a budget was interesting. So it was a lot of reusing old furniture, but making it look nicer and changing the layout of the room. We got paints from this charity that gets old paints from Homebase and places like that and sells them at a massive discount, but then all their money goes to charity. So we managed to do the whole staff room on, I think, £110.
Wow.
So a lot of creative thinking and trying to work around it. The other big challenge for us was parent and carer engagement. That's always a challenge for us. We get a good chunk who do engage and then a bigger chunk that don't. And it's normally the ones that you most want to get engaging that are the hardest to reach. So that was a challenge, definitely.
And what helped you overcome those barriers, do you think?
So in terms of the budget, definitely creative thinking, getting the staff buy-in as well, and getting once staff could see the impact of things. It's been really nice actually, because we would, every so often just buy treats for the staff room and things like that, just to make people feel a bit happier. And then other staff started to do it because they thought it was nice. And then another member of staff started buying fruit for a fruit bowl every single week because she wanted to do that to make everyone feel nice. And it's just because it's part of the ethos of the school and everyone likes to do it, people just do nice little things for each other. And it because there's that staff buy-in, it's just kind of run on and run on. In terms of the parents and carers, again, creative thinking. So forced engagement. So when they came for parents and carers evening, I basically barricaded a corridor so that they had to come through the downstairs hall and they had to see what we were doing there, which was a sort of showcase of ingredients for success. And it was all fun activities of how they could do it. But they had to walk through, and some of them did just walk through, but a lot of them, because once they were in there were fun things for the kids to do and they would join in a bit and enjoy it. So it's creative thinking. It's been really big.
Stealth, I like that one.
Yeah. It will make them engage.
Yeah. Another school we work with wanted to do a positive pizza picnic party, and they entice the parents with pizzas. And then they food is a character strength art display.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Food definitely works. We had a coffee and cake morning to get parents in, and we did find food worked well. And then we tried to do some activities that were that they could bring their children along with. So we did things like a scavenger hunt, and we did like puzzles and things around the school. So that was kind of things that they could do during drop off and collection when they were there anyway. And then, oh, look, there's this fun thing. And we're also teaching about the character strengths. So it's, definitely self.
Self. And how are so integral to your school, but so one of the worries I have is that it can easily slip off an agenda, or like wellbeing can be seen as a bolt-on or a quick fix. And, you know, what would you say to schools that are thinking about it like that, or what would your advice to them be?
I think if you start with that, I think you would see the impact it has, and you would see that it is so much stronger if you build it in as an integral part. So even if you just started with a little bolt-on where you just did a few nice things, you'd start to see the impact of it. But I think it's definitely an area that's hugely worth investing in. I think the impact that we've seen on everything, particularly I would say in terms of behavior, because once you've got amazing behavior, the children are so much more ready to learn, that actually it has a bigger impact on everything you need to improve as a school. So whether you need to improve attendance or behavior or attainment, having effective well-being helps with all of that. So putting it at the forefront of what you do is going to be absolutely huge. It has like I said, it's got really wide-reaching impact. It leaves you with happier staff, and having happier staff means that it's a more positive place to work, and you will feel happier about going into work. It's really important to get that feedback, so constant feedback from your staff, and even sometimes if it's not what you want to hear, really just taking it, having that honest approach to things and saying, do you know what, actually we could, when we first did our surveys, communication kept coming up as a huge thing that was stressing people out. They didn't always feel things were communicated, and we had to have a really good look at ourselves and go, right, well, how are we going to improve this? I think Worth It has been absolutely fantastic. So that first training I did, we had quite regular meetings, and it was learning things that I didn't know about before, like positive psychology and the broaden and build theory and things like that, and starting to test things out in school. You really see people respond to it, and it just has such a huge impact. So I would definitely say to anyone who's thinking about doing it, really go for it, because it does have such a huge impact, and you won't regret it.
Yeah, thanks. So is there anything about our way of working that you've really appreciated that has helped you, do you think?
Definitely promoting a whole school approach. I found that incredibly helpful, because I found it a really effective tool to look at what our school was doing well, what were the things we already had in place, being able to take that time to really reflect on our practice and work out, okay, actually we've got this bit down, but this whole area is a big weakness of ours and we need to invest more time. So I found that incredibly helpful. The positive psychology and just that general positive way at looking at things and reframing things, to look at them in a way of how can we improve it, how can we learn from it, how can we foster those better relationships. I think I definitely took that away from the Worth It training of let's be positive. I remember you showed a video about how as mental health leaders we can be a real catalyst for change, and that really stuck with me, that it's about being a catalyst for change. If you go into it, and you personally are a very inspiring speaker, so the way you talk about things, it really enthuses people, and I think I took that away as well, that if you want to introduce something, you have to really go for it. You have to be enthusiastic about it, and if you can see why it's important, and if you can communicate that across to people, then they're with you, and you can go really far with it.
Thank you, I really appreciate that. I'm really moved. You've made a lot of difference to so many children's lives, Carla, and I just think it's amazing.
Oh, thank you. I cry if people cry, and this is
thank you.
What a way to end an interview, just both of us in tears.
Thank you for sharing your amazing journey and all your hard work and everything. You've made such a difference to your school community, and by doing this, like, hopefully other people can see it's possible, you know. It's can seem a big frightening, it can seem a big overwhelming task, can't it? If you like, if you were giving advice to a mental health lead now, because a lot more people are becoming mental health leads, you're kind of ahead of the game there, like, what would you advise them?
First thing is, don't do it alone. You know, if it were just me having to do this, it would be an incredibly daunting task. So there are a lot of like-minded people who really believe that mental health is important and believe that it has a huge impact on everything. So find those people, put it out to all your staff, and don't just limit it to teachers or senior management, or just put it out to everyone and say, we're working on mental health. If you want to have your say, please do. Because people are really passionate. When we have a wellbeing meeting, people have been on Pinterest, or they've been on like the Facebook group for the mental health leads, and they come to us with ideas, and it's invaluable. So I think the biggest thing I would say is don't do it on your own. Get your senior leadership to buy into it, and you know, if they're reluctant, which I know is an issue some mental health leads have found, try and encourage them to look at other schools who are doing it well, so that they can see how it does have a wide impact, and how worth it is. There you go, little throwing of the name. And I think and reach out to other people, because even if you're struggling to find your people in your school, there are Facebook groups, and there are places that you can go to get support. Never be afraid of asking for support, because it's what we're trying to teach the children is, you know, it's okay to struggle, it's okay to need help. And I think it's important that mental health leads do that as well. You know, don't try and take on the world on your own, because it's going to be too much. Get that support and reach out to people.
Yeah, you're modeling those behaviors for well-being, aren't you? In your every moment of doing that job. Wow. So, and my other concern is that people are approaching this as in they're looking at the dysfunction, or they're looking at the children that are really suffering and struggling, which you know is an important part of it. But how do you think an approach where it's more holistic and it's a whole school approach, like it tackles that?
I think when, like I said at the beginning of this journey, all of our mental health stuff was really just focused at people who were the children who had bad mental health, who were really struggling, and there wasn't anything for the wider school. And that's kind of, I started with the wider school, because our Senko was looking at the children who had targeted needs. So I looked at the wider school, but what we found is that as that's developed, those children who did have specific needs, it swept them up with it. So it's impacted on all children positively, including those with the targeted needs. So actually then there's fewer children who need that extra level of support. And just things like, we have sort of emotional groups going on. So now interventions used to just be, you know, your standard maths, English interventions, but now we have various nurture groups, we have team building groups, we have groups for all different areas of social and emotional mental health. And that picks up the children who are struggling, but also other children as well, and it just sweeps everyone up to being more mentally healthy and having better emotional well-being.
And then you can work with the ones, you've got more capacity, haven't you, to work with the children or provide support for
and then you
have really do need that.
Then there's always going to be a few children who do need that extra support and that extra level, but you definitely find, like, for your pastoral leads or whoever it is, there's fewer of those children that need that extra level of support, because everyone is getting a sort of universal level of support.
I feel like that is a good place to end our conversation. Like, that was so interesting. And do you know what's really interesting is that I say that all that stuff, but because I'm saying it, it's different when you say you've done it and it's happened. You know, kind of, it's brilliant because it's real, you know, it's really happened in your school.
It's great, and it's lovely. It just makes school a nice place to be.
now. Yeah, what were your last points you were just saying?
Oh God, I can't remember. I think just that
I think we've covered everything.
I just think the more you do, the nicer it is to be in school, and I think that impacts on everyone.
Yeah. What's your next steps? What's your plans now?
So always parents and carers. We're trying to come up with more ways of getting staff having a sense of belonging, because I think at the moment a lot of what we need to look at is in reaction to COVID-19, because that's had such a huge impact on people's well-being. So that's very much our next steps, is we're seeing less of parents and carers than we normally do, because they can't have those conversations at the door, those casual conversations on the playground and things like that. So trying to make sure we're able to keep those relationships really strong, but then also for staff, particularly staff who live alone, or who are self-isolating, trying to make sure that sense of belonging is still there. So I've stolen an idea from my husband's work of, we're going to have the Mouse and Monitor virtual pub every Friday as a place for people to come and join and just have a bit of a chat, because people were saying they just don't have those same opportunities to just have a bit of a chat as they would normally do. Like normally at the beginning of a staff meeting, you all sat together, you just have a bit of a talk. So that's our sort of next priority, is keeping things going in challenging times.
Yeah, and because you've got this strong foundation already, it's like those things are easier to implement, I suppose, than doing everything from scratch.
Yeah, and it is, that lovely phrase of unprecedented times. We hear it all the time, but it is true. And we had a bubble go down the other week, and it's all of the stress from that, and trying to come up with things that work for everyone, and making sure that well-being doesn't take a backseat to things like remote learning or those challenges.
Well, you're just doing an amazing job, and the children that go to your school are very fortunate indeed. So just carry on being amazing. And thank you for your time. And you don't have to try very hard. You just keep doing what you're doing.